Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the audit meeting for MES, May 26, 2022, and it is 8:32 this morning. I hope everybody is doing well. We have quite a full agenda, but I think we can probably tick through things rather expeditiously. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes, and or are there any questions or offering of amendments?
There you go.
Is that a motion to approve?
It is.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Is there a second? I think it's up to me to second. Is Mr. Davis here?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'll second the motion. Any questions or comments? And if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have unanimous approval. And next on the agenda is the RSM fiscal year 21 expenses audit. And Ms. Coleman is here to go over that with us.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here with you this morning. Just wanted to kind of go over this particular item that we are wrapping up with management currently. I can share my screen as it relates to a draft report to make it easily to follow. Hopefully everyone can see this. Please let me know otherwise.
We can see it.
Wonderful. Just to remind everyone, we were hired to review some of the non-executive expenses. So what that entailed is taking a look at the supplier invoices, the AP purchases and their P cards, as well as employees throughout the agency overall in terms of their agreements with the policies at hand. We went along in terms of grabbing the policies that were relevant for this particular procedure. And we sampled for each of these three populations a total of 30 transactions. We traced each of these expenses to underlying support. We traced the expense to the general ledger, and we compared the expense to the policies that noted just to ensure that they were being adhered to overall. So what we noted is really only in one area. So overall, when we looked at the purchase card transactions, the 30 transactions did not have any deviations from policy, as well as the supplier invoice transactions. They did not have any deviations from policy. The only one was the employee expense transactions, where we noted 5 out of the 30 items that we reviewed that amounted roughly to $730 where the employee did not adhere to the policy that was at hand, where they were supposed to submit the expense within 5 business days. That was applicable up to October of 2020. And a new policy was put into play where they were given up to 30 days. And that was applicable further expenses after October 2020. So that was really the only exception that was noted when we took a look to close to 100 transactions in each of these 3 buckets. We've shared this report. Not sure if you guys had any questions or anything, any further clarity that is needed.
Thank you. I do not have any questions. Does anybody else?
I would like to make a comment. I want to thank Valerie, because this is the first time we are doing this audit under MES Reform Act. And one of our senior manager, was leaving the company, and she accommodated us to get this audit done on time. As mentioned in the audit, the only thing was employee submitting expenses late. There was no finding of missing receipts. There was no finding of any missing approvals. Everything was followed properly. We have communicated to all the employees that they need to turn in their receipt within 30 days. So employees are getting used to it. So it is taken care of.
5 days was a little stringent. Anyway, I mean, that was, I think it was unreasonable. But
yeah, no, but it was originally designed for travel. and say if you are traveling, then you have to do it, but there was no separate policy for our other expenses. But we took care of it there in October 2020, so it's 30 days for all of them.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. 5 days is very stringent. That doesn't leave a lot of room for wiggle. Do we need to make a recommendation to accept this, or is this just a presentation?
Just a presentation.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the RSM FY22 audit plan. And again, Ms. Colliman is here to walk us through that.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have my colleague Kayla project our presentation and go through. We'll start from there.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. Thank you again. We can move on to the next slide. This is for us to just really kind of go over our audit plan for fiscal year 2022. One more slide, Kayla, and really start with the meat of it. So I wanted to introduce our team and our audit timing. Again, my name is Valerie Collum and I am the partner in the engagement. I've been working with the MES management since 2019. And we're excited to continue our relationship and work towards fiscal year 2022 audit. I have with me Kayla Lipston. She will be the manager in the engagement. She has extensive years serving state and local government. And I'm happy to introduce her to you guys and work together as we roll out the 2022 cycle. Wanted to project a little bit of our audit timing. Right now, we will be starting our planning and interim fieldwork around the June and July 2022 timeframe. Kind of just getting our bearings, doing a lot of the legwork of planning, getting some understandings, any new policies, working with management to go through transaction cycles and figure out if there were any changes that we need to be made aware of. We'll come back around August, September, and really dive into the final field work, giving management the ability to close their books properly as of June 30th, 2022. And with everything going well, we hope to be with you here again in October of 2022, projecting our final procedures, what transpired for this particular audit. Okay. And here, I just always want to outline our engagement objectives. There's a little bit of a few things that we do for the agency that we wanted you to be aware of. For us, our primary objective is to conduct our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. And because you are a state and local government, we add a little bit extra, and we do conduct your audit under government auditing standards, which are issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. So that's the beginning side in terms of the financial statements. We also perform the audit of the June 30th, 2022 requirements for the federal government audit, federal awards. So that is done under uniform grant guidance, where we tackle what the organization expended as it relates to federal funds in the fiscal year, and we audit the ones that are deemed major and important to review. In addition to that particular audit, we do audit or take a look at the indirect cost rate report, a 6 customers report, and of course the expense review AUP that we just discussed earlier. Next slide. What I wanted to kind of outline a little bit here is the responsibilities between both parties. In order for this to really work and this arrangement to flow through easily, we both have responsibilities at hand. And I don't want to necessarily go through each of the bullets noted here, but we do indicate that management has responsibilities such as the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, for the design and implementations and maintenance of internal controls, to comply with rules and regulations and laws. So those are noted here in terms of key responsibilities that management must adhere to for this to work nicely. Additionally, on the next slide, we also have auditor responsibilities on our end, and it is to conduct our audit under GAS, the generally accepted standards that I noted earlier. It is to ensure and perform procedures to obtain evidence about the support reviewed and the disclosures noted within the financials. And we always indicate, our audit is to obtain reasonable assurance. It's not about 100%. So we always note that for everyone involved to be aware of it. Additionally, one of the things that we wanted to point out is when we do an audit, we don't necessarily look at every single thing. We look at things that are important for the organization based on risk assessments performed on the organization. So what I'm going to have Kayla do is kind of go over some key areas that we focus on.
Thanks, Valerie. So yeah, so like Valerie said, this is kind of a complete list of, some of the high level areas that we, look at as part of our audit. I won't read through 100% of them, but some of the major ones, as part of our planning procedures, we go through agency-wide risk assessment processes, management override of controls, and any updates to understandings of the internal control documentation and environment. And then we move into actually testing, and that involves significant account balances such as cash and investments and their related disclosures, the accounts receivable and they're related to allowances, the revenue recognition, ensuring that's consistent with the applicable guidance, leases, and as GASB 87 is coming down the pike, any implications with that, the pension and OPEB, and like Valerie said, there's also the compliance with government auditing standards and the OMB uniform guidance. So those are some of the most significant areas. And so as part of our risk assessment procedures, we're really looking at significant risk of material misstatement, which is really any part of this, performance risk assessment procedures is in order to identify risks of material misstatement, whether they're due to fraud or error. And as part of these procedures, we determine whether the risks are identified as a significant risk. And if they are, then, in our professional judgment, this requires some special audit considerations. So on this next slide, the next two slides, we'll show, these are the significant risks of material misstatement that we've, identified. And those are management override of controls, the fraudulent revenue recognition, OPEB, and the pension liability for, the valuation side of things. And then also the landfill closure and post-closure costs and liability.
Thank you, Kayla. And I just wanted to also add, as it relates to those accounts, the last three are really significant estimates when you think about it. You're getting a valuation report of some capacity from third parties. So those are always noted as areas of where error and fraud can occur. So we always deem those to be very significant in general. And the first two, of course, in any organization, that is an area of risk for us. Does the management have the ability to circumvent the controls that are in place? So that is an area that we have a planned response in terms of doing further audit procedures to ensure that that hasn't transpired during the fiscal year under review. And lastly, for today's meeting, one of the things that we like to always do is, again, we report to the audit committee and we provide any sort of communication as it relates to what transpires throughout our review of the records of the organization. But we also want to get your thoughts. If there's any areas that you'd like us to focus on, any knowledge of fraud that you'd like us to be aware of, and so we can incorporate in our audit plan. So this is really the time that we just kind of open up to the floor, have any sort of information from you guys to let us know if there's anything that you'd like us to look at while we work with management this cycle.
I have a question about the timeline of the work.
Sure.
When will this audit be completed? Just trying to get.
Yes, absolutely. We've targeted the issuance around October of 2022.
Okay. And that's for fiscal 21. Is that it?
No, fiscal 22.
22. Okay, so you're actually closing the books on the most recent fiscal year.
You got it.
Some of the boards that I serve on and have served on at an audit committee meeting, they have an executive session with just the audit committee members. There's an opportunity. You asked a question of us just now. Is there anything you would like us to look into? While I don't have an answer for you now, it's usually an element of the presentation of the report and everything else so that we can close the book on it. And it's done with the staff out of the room, and it gives us an opportunity to ask some questions of you, particularly things like, was the staff cooperative? I mean, a lot of times your boilerplate letter says that we had excellent cooperation and everything else, and with an executive session, we're able to say, did you really get the cooperation that you were entitled to? So I hope you work that into your work plan, because I think that's sort of standard operating procedure now for audit committees corporately.
Yes. You're
Not so much
absolutely-
governmentally, but corporately, that's how they do it. And we're sort of a hybrid. So we're sort of hung on two hangers. We have to comply with the government standards, but we're also sort of an enterprise, which leads us to look, smell, and taste more like a corporate body.
If we did that, would that be open or closed?
No, it's closed. It's an executive.
Sure that
No, it's an executive session.
on our state.
Yeah, and it would clearly be covered and permissible under the Open Meetings Act. And but it's just a way. And I think we'd be facing the question of why didn't you have an executive session about fraud, waste, and abuse, and that sort of thing. So if you could include that in your list of things to do, I think that might be helpful.
Absolutely. And I'll let that, I guess, with management to decide how we can go around executive session. I don't think I have the ability to call that, but it's up to you guys on how we can set that up and have one. I'm more than happy to have one.
Well, it's really a board-driven thing. The board would ask that you would participate in such a session, and it would be done when you are presenting the audit formally to the audit committee. It could also be done at a full board meeting, but clearly most of the time it's the province of the audit committee.
Yes.
Thank you for that feedback, Mr. Neal. I do think that's a wonderful idea, and I think we can incorporate that, roll that into the process.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments about the audit plan for this coming year?
I did have one other.
Yes.
Do we go on the site of any of our customers to do audits, or do we just confine ourselves to what comes in the door here? In other words, there could be some monkey business going on at the vendor level where one of our customers and our staff could modify documents that are submitted either for payment or approval. And I was just wondering if we actually go on site to some of our larger
Well, I
customers.
think they'd have to have an independent contract to do that.
Well, and Winsome
Yeah.
does that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I come in.
Yeah.
They do more of a,
Yeah.
financial reporting. I do more internal auditing where I look at operations. I go at the site, I look at the vendor, I look at the vendor contracts, customer contracts, and look for compliance to those.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do our auditors review your work?
No, they don't. I do report out to the audit committee on my findings.
So that's a separate track.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Thank you. I promise to shut up now.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up those.
Three strikes and you're out. Three strikes and you're out. That's it.
Yes, and I just want to point out, my contact information is noted in this presentation that you guys have. So if there's any sort of concerns or comments or anything that you'd like to discuss one-on-one, I'm more than happy to adhere to that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank Ms. Coleman and Ms. Lipston for joining us today. That was very insightful, and thank you for fielding the
Shelley?
questions.
Shelley, just one more thing.
Yes.
Is there anything from the events of the past that need to be incorporated in audits going forward? I mean, we had the reform legislation and everything else. Are we, I'm just trying to anticipate a legislative question, because one of the things that's going to prove whether we did okay or not is a clean audit. And they're going to want to know that the things that might have been wrong have been looked at again, and somebody will say that things are okay now. Are we paying any special attention to that area of activity, so that we can? I really want the legislature to feel comfortable that we're hitting on all cylinders and we're totally compliant. So that would be
That would be me.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think with the RSM audit, that's a fairly standard audit, and the types of things that the legislature would be looking into might be the internal auditors.
Yeah, the only reason I raised the question is that internal auditors, mean no disrespect, or internal auditors, and the reason you have outside firms look at what you're doing is that they have the perspective and distance that we have. We may want to then feature our internal auditor to make sure that any sensitive things have been covered, so that the legislature is satisfied that we've turned a corner.
We can have the legislature meet Ms. Condra.
They already have.
Yeah,
They already have, and so we do an annual risk assessment, which we're gonna review for MES, and
that's good.
So
yes.
besides this audit that Valerie just presented, it is specifically to meet MES Reform Act requirement.
Right.
Because it is very broad, says all expenses. Our major expenses are credit card expenses, expense reports, and supplier invoices. And we give RSM the full data, every single transaction, and they pick randomly the 100 samples,
Yeah.
So that was done specifically for the all expenses audit, So regular audit, they have materiality. Well, in this audit, they can pick randomly anything and ask for.
Well, then maybe the letter transmittal that the firm gives to us ought to have a sentence in it that says that pursuant to the Reform Act, we conducted this audit in conjunction with and compliance with the Reform Act, just so there's something that you can point to that shows that we've made some changes.
Noted.
Okay, so Valerie will talk about that, because here your letter says that it is based on the certain procedures we requested. So we'll see what we can do about that as a request from Mr. Neal.
Sure.
Thank you, and a great discussion. Thank you very much, everyone. Next on the agenda is the internal auditor report. So Ms. Condra, it's your turn, and we're going to talk about the FY 23-24 MES risk assessment and internal audit plan.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you, audit committee, for listening to me today. And I do have an agenda that I will cover. I am going to talk about the FY 22 audit updates. I'm going to talk about the fraud hotline log. We're going to cover the internal audit benchmarks. And I'm going to talk about the FY 23 and FY 24 risk assessment internal audit plan, and then any questions that you guys may have. So just have a brief overview of the FY 22 audit updates. So in terms of that, we selected in FY 22, we selected 4 audits to be performed based on the priority and talking to the managing directors. And they were also selected based on the FY 21 risk assessment and approved by MES management. Also going forward, just give you an update on that. So currently, we're performing a Rocky Gap operational review. We're wrapping up complete the audit testing, looking to draft the audit report in June 10th and distribute the final report June 17th. The next audit that we're gonna have for FY 22, which is in the planning phase, is a review of Hartford site management. So I just wanted to, and just to touch what you said, I just wanted to give you an allocation of the internal audit resources and what we did throughout the fiscal year of 21 and 22. So based on the resources for those years, we spent 26% of our time on special investment, investigation and unplanned audits. We invested our time on 38% for planned audits as identified as area of risk in the FY 21 and FY 22 risk assessment. Also 21% for developing the risk assessment FY 23 and 24 that we're gonna go over today. And then 10% of our time is to respond and follow up to potential reports of fraud. I don't have my mouse. So fraud hotline. Movie time, no calls, no emails, notice for FY 2022, so which is really good. I'm very happy for that because it gave me, because I'm an auditor of one, so it gave me time to actually do planned audits.
I kept on saying we, I was like, well,
Yeah,
who's we?
well, I have to say, I have a present, I am multiple. It's, I'm looking to the future, I'm saying we, all right?
Well, your fraud hotline, not having any calls can either be very good news or it can be very bad news.
Well, I
We're
did in the
gonna look at the
beginning,
context.
so in the beginning I did, and I think the presence of doing the initial audit, so I came aboard in October 2020, and yes, it, as Dr. Glass can know,
There's lots to do.
lots to do,
Yeah.
so I'm very happy, and the respect that I get as an internal auditor from the MES staff is really good. So just to let you guys know, May is Internal Audit Awareness Month. And in the effort of that, I would like to share information from the Institute of Internal Auditors 2022 survey. They call it a plus. So what that survey does is it provided a benchmark data from internal audit leadership, which covered October 5th, 2010 to 2021. 21, yeah, I probably made a mistake, but. So the trends that they covered is trends for risk and audit, and trends within leadership metrics, and trends within the budget and staff. So I did give a copy, if you look in your package, I did give a copy of more detail on those 3 trends, and because of time constraints, I'm not gonna go over it, so you can look at it at your own leisure. But what I did with that information was I looked at it from, they came from different sectors. So what I concentrated on was the nonprofit sectors and public sector, because that's basically what MES is, right? So want to know what the other internal auditors are doing within those sectors. How do we measure up, right? So in terms of the trends for risk and audit, and as you see in this graph, I thought this was very informative to show where the certain the trends came from. Like you see 11% was from nonprofit and 22% was from public sectors. That's what we kind of focus on. And then the internal audit function size ranged from one auditor to 50 plus. right? The majority, as you see, 40% were within the 4 to 9 staffing for internal audit function. And then we they looked at the internal audit maturity, right? So they talk about levels from level 1 to level 5, and I'll go through that as I go through the trends. So within the trends for risk and audit, what we saw, what they provide to us was, for the first time in the survey history, sustainability and non-financial reporting risk levels edged upward, especially for public traded organizations, but which we don't cover. But again, in terms of the non-financial reporting, I've seen that in our risk assessment that we perform for the agency. Another thing that we see in the audit plans for these organizations is cybersecurity is trending up on audit plans for all respondents. Since because MES, we're a little behind on the IT part of it. We don't fall within, for us, the cybersecurity is more on a lower base, but I'm in talks with the chief IT, Ray Rubio, in terms of doing actually a IT risk assessment for MES to see where we stand, where we would probably get a third party to come in and look at that. So in terms of leadership, what they're seeing is a lot of staff turnover. Internal audit appears to be experiencing the great resignation, thank you, with many functions reporting voluntary turnover as a reason behind staff decreases. Another thing is within the maturity level, we're seeing that a lot of as you see here, level 4 is where everyone needs to be. They're 54%. Right now, MES was at a level 1 maturity. We're currently at a level 2. And in terms of the levels, I wanted to kind of what that means in terms of levels. I have my cheat sheet here. So level 1 would be informal, right? It'll be the internal audit activities ad hoc, unstructured. Professional practice have been established and there's an absence of infrastructure. That's where the internal audit function was, right? It's currently at level 2 where the internal audit activity has established and is maintaining the repeatability of processes. There is partial conformity to the IIA standards and appropriate reporting relationships established. So in terms of, we have an internal audit charter, MES has an internal audit charter, so that's established. Where we want to be is a level 4, and that's managed. And this is where the internal audit activity is recognized as a significant contributor to the organization. Performance metrics are in place to measure and monitor internal audit performance. Internal audit is a well-managed business unit. So that's where we want to be. We're currently at level 2, but we'll get there. We'll get there. In terms of the budgets and staff, well, budgets and staff levels, there appears to be continued uncertainty and cautiousness. Internal audit budgets and staff levels held up year over year, but organizations have generally stopped short of giving internal audit more resources, and travel budgets have continued to face widespread state cuts. So a lot of people are doing a lot of remote. So for MES, well, since we're in Maryland, it really, we're very lean. We're very lean. So I think we only did one overnight stay, and that was when we performed the Rocky Gap testing and we had to go on site.
Long commute.
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. So again, I did give information, and Ms. Heller, I will send that to you, email, just if you guys want to look at more numbers and where we lie on that. All right, so, FY23 and 24 risk assessment. So again, it's called an annual assessment because we assess the risk based on prior fiscal year numbers. So the last assessment was based on fiscal year 20. This assessment data, this is based on FY21 data. And so that's why, and then it's gonna be like that. That's why it's really called an annual risk assessment. But it's basically performed like maybe a year and a half, 2 years, because it covers 2 fiscal years. So I did give a printout of the top 15 risks that I'm, based on the risk assessment, we identified 15 top risks for MES. And on the left, you see the risk ranking. There's the audit units and covered description of the risk and the risk area. So the number 1 is the human resource and affirmative action. And the risk on that is increased vacancy throughout the agency, and the risk area is business. The second one, again, it's human resources and affirmative action. And the description of the risk is lack of competitive compensation. Again, it affects the business area.
Could I ask you
Sure.
a question?
Sure.
Who were the people who put this together to decide, between 1 and 15 is a long way to go, so there's gotta be.
So the process for the risk assessment is meet with managing directors, all managing directors, their chiefs, their division chiefs, and then a survey was sent randomly to employees, different from the agency-wide survey
So
that
it's
Dr.
coming up
Glass was.
from the-
Yes, so it's coming up and going, and
And
going
then
down.
decided to put in ABC.
Yes.
DA.
So what happened is I asked relevant risk questions, covers from fraud to what's new businesses, who's the largest customer, and then also based on when you look at the data, who's our top 10, top 20, like we do is an 80-20 rule, who's our top 20 customers, who's our top 20 vendors,
So
right?
Right.
And who's utilizing them within the organization, right? We get data from HR, what's going on, what's the age towards that, and you'll see that in the risk assessment.
And there's an expertise of that.
Yes,
you
and that'd be
people-
me, that'd be me.
Right.
And the managing directors, yeah.
Okay. This is not an outside project.
This is
an
not,
inside
this is,
project.
yeah, this is internal,
Okay.
yeah. And so this is part of MES Enterprise Risk Management program. So where managing directors would use the risks to kind of look at it from their KPI perspective to making sure, okay, did we get it right? Let's fine tune some stuff and just kind of understanding from a broad agency wide. So I'm not looking at this to specifically saying, oh, one area said something. I'm looking at it as a whole. Is it the same trend that's going forward? So.
The one thing that I'm really concerned about is IT security. That you've had in Maryland, you've had hospitals and other entities, literally crippled where they couldn't do their work. And I take it our outside auditor is not going to opine on our security, right? That's an outside their scope of work. And I strongly recommend that we get with the folks that do it and have them do that so that we know
Awesome.
where we stand, because I'm telling you that's not even in the top 10. That's like in the top 2 corporate risks everywhere. If
Yes.
somebody gets a hold of your system and
And I do get that. The one thing with MES in the business is that we're not dealing with individuals. So that's more, so if we had, Mr. Brown next door, with dealing with actual clients, then we would be at a bigger risk versus we deal with companies.
Yeah.
So that's that, and that's why, and again, I'm not an IT auditor,
Yeah.
so that's why I need to sit with Ray Rubio. We talk, we come together and then present to Dr. Glass, Ms. Frederick, and the audit committee to say, hey, this is what we're coming up with, and to get an approval to get external.
The area of risk that I'm concerned about is that we do not, I mean, I have a healthcare background, you have to worry about protected health information and everything
Yes.
else getting loose. But we deal with, most of our customers are counties, municipalities, and public. And so somebody could get into their system
So we're not
and
linked.
inhibit them from
Mhm.
being able to function. And I don't know how that, I mean, don't we use Workday, which is what the state works, so I mean.
But it's not linked.
It's
We're
not linked.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
well,
that's what. and
that's a good
not
thing,
linked.
that's a good thing, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that Baltimore County, and they've had some problems, could have an issue, and it could bleed into our operations in some sort of way that I'm not a techie, but it's the kind of stuff that you have to.
So one of the things I do when I do a site management review, I do security in terms of how we are protecting the site where we're at. How we're protecting our computers, who has access to it, right? So that's one of the things that I've done. And that's where the problem comes in, where individual would, if they were planning to do something, and I would say mostly dangerous water and wastewater, because that's how if God forbid a terrorist comes into play, that's how they would tap into the water system.
Yeah.
And so in terms of, I'm not finished with the Rocky Gap, so I can't give a result of it yet. But that's one of the things I do look at is security and who has access and cameras and so forth.
That's important, and
Yes.
the truth about it is that we're only hearing about the publicly reported stuff. I know of organizations who've paid the pirates. In other words, they wanted $100,000 to give you back your system. And
Yeah.
if you're talking about water treatment plants and sewage treatment plants, there's a lot of mischief that could be made there,
Mhm.
which would put local governments in a real bad position. So we don't own that, but we're part of it. And so we just need to evaluate what we're doing and how we respond to it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, but I can't, with Ray Rubio's help, we're gonna put together and it's gonna be where resources that Ray and I probably would have to go to the sites and seeing what's, from an IT perspective, what are the risks. So definitely, I'm with you 120% on that. So as I go through here, as you guys could see, if you have any questions, I don't wanna, time is of the essence. So and these are the units that we looked at. These are rankings. So when you look at operational, it's ranked 1, and the reason why operational audit units risk 1 because ranked 1 because again, it's dealing with compliance, it's dealing with invoices, dealing with billing, right? It's dealing, for me, when you look at finance is the results, operation is the beginning, and garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the operational is messed up, right, there's gonna be something wrong with finance, with the finance numbers. So that's number 1 for us. The HR is number 2. Integrated is number 3, and integrated means it encompasses a lot. So it encompasses compliance, operational, financial controls. So that would be number 3, financial and controls, that's number 4, and information systems, number 5. So as I gave you guys a printout, because as we cover the audit plan for fiscal year 2023 and 2024, the question is, so how are we gonna tackle these 15 risks within the audit plan, right? And so as you look here, I'm gonna try to move this. The annual risk assessment, this is what we're planning to do, perform an agency-wide risk assessment. That's part of the plan. The budgeted, again, the budget numbers that I have here is estimated, right? Could be less, could be more, all depends. These are the timeframes that I cover. And again, to the right, covered risk through annual risk assessments in a monitoring fraud hotline. This is an ongoing job for me. And basically what we do in terms of when a hotline calls in, I coordinate with the MES management if it's in a different, in a particular business unit, and also dealing with the Attorney General for appropriate follow-up in terms of that when that comes in. Look to budget for 100 hours, and that's for the whole 2 fiscal years I do that. So special investigations, different than fraud hotline, especially investigations if there's anything requested audits from MES management or from Attorney General that are not identified in the risk assessment needs immediate attention. So I dedicate 340 hours to that. And again, that's for the whole 2 fiscal years. And the covered risk is to TBD. It all depends on what I'm reached out for. And then I have auxiliaries. So this is where Miss Valerie comes into play and her team, where I do if I'm pulled in, any oversight of external audit, internal control, financial reporting review. This is where having them, right, will cover risks 4, 5, and 6, right? And that's, again, the time span is usually, I put here May 2023 to June 2023. So this is the risk that the RSM team covers. Then we have integrated, and again, this covers contract administration management, which deals with business group policy and processes, terms and conditions, compliance, any cost reimbursement review, accurate cost allocation, project risk, and budget management. And I allocated 450 hours. Again, time frame August 22nd to November 22, and it will cover the risks 5, 9, 11, 15, and 8. And then we have the human resource and affirmative actions, and that's looking at new hiring on board, HR service level expectations, interview and offer processes, HR policies and procedures, and HR strategy on staffing forecast. So allocated 350 budgeted hours for that, and the time frame is anticipated for December 2021 to March 2023, and it will cover the risk 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9. And then operational, and that's basically site management. Are we looking at proper site coverage, proper time management, keeping monitoring system, purchasing process that deals with one part and reimbursables, looking at maintenance of equipment, vehicles, and inventory and asset management. Allocated 450 hours for that, and the time span would be April 2023 to August 2023, and it covers 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, and 15, and a total budget hours of 1890. So again, as Dr. Glass knows, I'm dedicated to do up to 1 to 3 audits every fiscal year. Again, auditor of 1, right? It all depends on what comes in, if there's any hotline, special investigations, and this is my time that I have projected to cover the So, any questions?
I got one question. How many people are in your unit? That's it?
Yes.
You're looking at it.
You're looking at the unit right there.
I was thinking of something, it's like people getting into a C-130 or something.
It's me, it would be me in a C-130.
Okay, well, God bless you for that.
Let me ask a quick question on some of these operational issues. Actually, it covers many of the operations. I didn't hear anything about safety.
So we do have a environmental, we have a safety and environmental compliance. Well, that's their job. So I don't scope creep in their job, what they do, but I do when I do a site management or contract and I'm going on site, I do reach out to Erin. And I reach out to her and say, hey, can I get the most recent safety or inspections, and I want to know what are the action plans, if there are any findings. And so based on that, what I would do is get the action plans, and when I'm at the site, I will verify those action plans we're taking. And that's and if I see any blatant safety issues, I will definitely, if there's an issue, I will bring Erin to the closeout meeting where she would have an action plan to that finding. Yeah, so, but I do cover that, but that's more, so I have a risk matrix when I'm actually doing my audits, and so that's more into the weeds, you know, when you talk about safety, but all of that, the contract management, site management, all in terms of, okay, what are we doing in terms of making sure we're compliant to that, but I just do an overview of it, but Erin's group, in terms of environmental compliance and safety, that's her wheelhouse.
You're probably doing this already, but it would seem to me, since you're it, you might want to meet periodically with senior management
I do.
and just tell them what you need
And so
and how to do it
Yeah.
so that it makes your job a little bit easier.
So I have a process, and in terms of the audit plan, I already set up an audit meeting in terms of prioritizing the audit plan for FY '23.
Good.
There on the managing director we have a commencement meeting where the audit manager is pulled in. I have a meeting with him first, just to ensure that it's okay to go ahead with this audit. You know, if anything is going on, if they still need it, do they need something else? And after their approval, then I will start reaching out. He'll tell me who my contact is. So I have a process, and I communicate all the time. I communicate them with terms of the risk assessment. Every fiscal year, I sit with them and say, hey, this is the one that we approved and said we're gonna cover, and you gave me the thumbs up. Is it still the same before I start for a new fiscal year? So yeah, so it's communication, because my job, right, is to ensure that whatever I'm doing is value added to the organization and to the management. So that's my job.
What you're looking for.
Yeah.
But internal compliance is everybody's job.
Yes.
So that's so.
So I'm the one to validate that.
You're the person with the whistle and striped shirt. So.
Exactly. So the first thing I do a lot of interviews, and I ask for policies and procedures. I review those. I look what the controls are. If anyone asks you, they like meetings upon meetings and it's a lot of walkthroughs.
Yeah.
Tell me what you do for the day.
Yeah.
How do you do that? It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Great.
So, any more questions?
Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive presentation. I really appreciate that. And obviously the others that are on site do as well, based on the feedback. Next, we are at old or new business. I know we are approaching the 9:30 mark. We have approximately 5 minutes, I believe, by my clock. Are there any other comments or concerns that could be considered old or new business prior to adjournment?
I'd like to ask a very quick question, only because I stepped out. On the number 3, the succession plan, do we have one? And
So at the upper management level, I've asked for everyone to know who is next up, and so that even is for absences. So all senior leadership, I know who the next person up is, down to division chiefs and below. That's where we have a lot of work to do, and what I know is informal. So we would need to formalize that. It's both part of this risk management plan. It's also a part of the strategic plan.
Well, I was wondering how wonderful this succession plan can be, given the amount of turnover that's going on in the industry, not so much MES, just across the board.
Well, we're focused on,
Yeah, so one of the things what I do, in wrapping up this audit, I do have a finding on succession planning, where it's not documented, but they do have one, and the reason being. So my job is when I do an audit, I identify a finding. The reason is just I identify, but understanding the reason why right? So a lot of issues with water, wastewater, right? All across the board. I sat in a meeting with, I probably shouldn't have, but I sat in a meeting of a county like different from Waiter Water Waster. They had like a board meeting, and that was one of the issues, is that they had lack of certified water and wastewater individuals, right? And so basically, again, with what's going on, not just at MES, not just in Maryland, but from a global perspective, right? It's the talent, lack of talent. And everyone is feeling it. And so no matter, and the reason why the turnover is so much is not because, oh, MES is doing a bad job, right? Is that the world's their oyster, right? And because there's a need, just like truck drivers, right? They feel they have the opportunity for better things. And, you know, MES's job is to kind of understand that gap, and that's, again, HR.
Also, the board, enterprise risk management is a board function. I'm glad you brought up succession management, because that's at the top of the list of every board's enterprise risk management profile. Is how do you keep the organization going? How do you keep salaries competitive and all that other stuff? You know, it may you know, the senior staff may develop these lists because they're closest to it, but we bear responsibility for how these things get addressed.
So it just, so that was one of the areas that shortages is operators. And I'm on the State of Maryland Operators Board, so I don't know how I can do anything with that other than me come out and maybe talk to some people, but I'll be happy if Dr. Glass, you guys find a need, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Wander downstairs.
Okay, thank you, everyone, to our guests and to the staff and board members that have attended. And looking for a motion for adjournment.
Guess it's up to me. I move we adjourn and go downstairs. We'll see you downstairs, Shelley. I don't know how you get downstairs from here.
I click a button.
Well, you've got 3 minutes to find out.
Yeah, she'll figure it out.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see most of you downstairs.
We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Yeah.